Mr Speaker, I want to start by doing something sort of slightly unusual, and that is to compliment the Minister of Health. It's not something I've done that often, but Mr Speaker, I think it is important to say that the world has improved a lot since Peter Dunne was packed off to Bali and this Minister took charge of this particular policy area. A degree of rationality has come into the debate. We've stopped having the embarrassing appearances on Campbell when the Minister goes to places where legal highs are sold, but he has no understanding of the communities where it's involved. And I also want to compliment the Minister on the consultation around the legislation, the fact that he worked hard to get this to go back and forth to the point where an overwhelming majority of Parliament are prepared to vote for it and no one's prepared to vote against it. Now, the other person who I would like to thank for his work in this area is David Farrar. Because, Mr Speaker, what has become absolutely clear to us over the last couple of weeks is that there has been a massive change of view following the questions that have been asked in Mr Farrar's polling of people around New Zealand as to their attitudes to these legal highs and also the testing of them in animals, which has been asked, I understand, both in the quantitative research but also in the focus groups that the National Party is running, I think, 4 times a week. And Mr Speaker, I want to say it is good in this particular case, and in fact generally, that the National Party is working hard to understand the limits of the tolerance of New Zealanders and to accept, and I accept with regret the fact that as a Parliament we got this legislation wrong. We got it a bit wrong. Mr Speaker, if Tony Ryle had been in charge of the regulatory system that went with the original legislation, then it wouldn't have, the legal highs that are being sold today and won't be sold on Thursday would have been not gone by lunchtime, but certainly gone by Christmas. Mr Speaker, any competent minister would have set up the regulatory regime. Peter Dunne worked on this legislation for years. He worked on it. He had his little moment. He had his year of problems and he had the leaking of the report. He had a bit of time off, but he came back and he had responsibility for the regulation in this area. And did he do his work, Mr Speaker? He did not. And as recently, Mr Speaker, as the 15th of April, he wrote a letter to me. He probably wrote one to everyone as well, because we don't have a special or close... We don't have a special or close relationship, Mr Dunne and I. But Mr Speaker, he was saying what good legislation it was and to give it a chance. Well, Mr Speaker, how wrong he was. And again, I want to congratulate David Farrar and his protege, the Prime Minister, for getting to the point of understanding what Kiwis think. Mr Speaker, what having this legislation did was allow us to focus on the people who were using these products. Mr Speaker, they were widely and generally available, but it was only in my particular case when there was a store 30 metres from my electorate office and I saw the queues there before school waiting for the shop to open that I really understood the addictive nature of this stuff. It's how I got to understand in Nainai the fact that so many people, mainly but not only young, and I say mainly but not only young, were being affected by it. Seeing the kids in the pushchairs being pushed in and out of these places by their parents. seeing the transactions that were occurring within metres of the shop between people who had an ID which said they were 18, although I must say some of them didn't look like it to me, and people who were clearly much younger than that age, and the exchanges, the drug deals that were going on there, Mr. Speaker, that was shocking. I'm sort of not absolutely aware of the sort of like the kawa or the protocols, Mr. Speaker, and I don't want to breach anything which is confidential from a select committee which you, Mr. Acting Speaker, and I sit on. But I might say that, without referring to that, but generally, we got to the point in the discussions on this where we, I think, got a better understanding of the dangers of it. We got from the officials a defence of the testing regime, but a defence which was not convincing. A defence which promoted the position of Mr. Dunn, but was not convincing, I think, to parliamentarians. Mr. Speaker, I came to this debate not as an expert in drug regulation area, not as someone who's had any experience. I think the only experience I've had in the health policy area was a discussion with Heather Simpson when I declined to be the minister in 2005. And so I respect the knowledge of a number of colleagues who know much more about this. But, Mr. Speaker, what I have been for many years is an owner of pets, and in particular an owner of dogs. I came to this issue as a result of the representations that were made to me by my constituents and other people from around Wellington who pointed out what could happen under this legislation, and I just asked myself the question, and I want to, without going into any detailed family matters, I have a close relative who is actively involved in medical research, and that involves on occasions animals. I do not think it's wrong. I think that there are occasions where it's necessary and where people are working in research with therapeutic outcomes. I think that can in fact be vital. I hope in the future, as computer modelling moves on, it will not be necessary. I know that it is substantially reduced, but if it is for a good purpose, Mr. Speaker, then I think it is important that it occurs for now. But, Mr. Speaker, there can be no excuse for killing animals for the purposes of boosting the profits of dealers in recreational drugs. There is no moral argument for that. Mr. Speaker, to say it's okay for rats and not for rabbits, as the Prime Minister tried to do for a week or so, and now we understand that Cabinet took that decision and then reversed it, is wrong. Mr. Speaker, we have come, I think, to a good position on this. I regret my vote for the legislation, and that I didn't understand the legislation, and I didn't understand the requirement to have a competent minister administering it when I voted for it. But, Mr. Speaker, we've got to the point now where we've made some progress.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Psychoactive Substances Amendment Bill, second reading.
This bill is set down for committee stage forthwith, so I declare the House in committee for consideration of the Psychoactive Substances Amendment Bill. Mr. Chairman. Speaker.
Members, the House